What's in the Box, episodes of horror with Donna and Eric. I'm Donna,
And I'm Eric.
and today we're discussing the book by Richard Laymon, The Night in Lonesome October. Um, Eric knows I've had a problem with that title, so I just call it the October book by
Yeah.
Laymon.
Yeah, well, it's a tough title. I think everybody has a problem with it. It doesn't it's not a natural title. It
Yeah,
kind of has to fight
it
through it.
definitely doesn't like roll off your tongue. And a lot of his other titles are kind of like a few words, like The Cellar, Beast
Yeah,
House, stuff like that. Um, so yeah,
kind of
I've,
visiting.
yeah. Um, The Night in the Lonesome October. I think if I force myself to slow down and say it now, hopefully
I
enough.
got a Khaleesi and a
Hello.
Totoro visit.
Oh, hi pups. So yeah, this is my first layman. Um,
And in a way, I feel that's a disservice because we got to work up to this one, right? But because it's one of my favorites. But at the same time, it's a good jumping off point. I mean, you can't. There's only one book I say you do wrong reading Layman. So
yeah,
all the other ones they all have their pluses. So
yeah. So the plot, I guess, behind this book is Ed. His girlfriend broke up with him. He's a college student, and he decides to go for a walk at night. Um, and it just leads him down a road of um, meeting some interesting characters and some interesting things happening to
I'm
him.
not 100% sure that he states where they are. I want to say they're in California.
Yeah, yeah, I
It's
don't.
like it's a small town. It's cool,
Yeah,
but it's not cold, which I kind of get that idea with California. If you're, at night it gets cold there in some places, but we're not
yeah,
close to the ocean. This isn't an ocean story.
yeah,
This is a college town, so you got a lot of weirdos.
yeah,
Um, it's funny. Everything about this book is what I like in fiction. It shouldn't work at all, and it's really boring if when you kind of say the premise of what it's about, because
mm,
it's really hard to pinpoint what it's about. It's just about a college kid who's kind of heartbroken, but at the same time he's not really. He's still kind of
yeah,
sowing his oats and stuff. So, but to think that he was able to not only put this together, but this isn't a small, like today everything's tiny, everybody's books are 50
yeah,
pages, 100 pages, whatever, which easily you could see how, okay, that idea fits into a 50, and this
yeah,
this guy puts it into what, 400? Did we get to 400?
yeah. It was like
346.
almost 400.
So
Yeah,
so and it he keeps your attention the entire time, and it's just the characters are believable and interesting and quirky, and
infuriating.
yes, yes. um, and fun. I mean, the story itself is fun, and this book
Yeah,
itself is actually one of the few books where I can specifically tell you it makes you uncomfortable, it makes you nervous. It actually does all the things that you get watching a really good movie. A really good
yeah,
horror movie, you get the same feeling when they're under the bridge.
yeah.
You actually can
Yeah,
feel your heart race, your breath catch, and he is just perfect in spelling out that whole situation. Um, uh, when I mean, like you said, the whole premise is he goes out and he meets these characters, but he becomes fascinated because he starts noticing this one girl walking
hmm,
around at night, and then she disappears, and so he starts following her because he's completely transfixed by this girl.
right.
And he discovers that she breaks into people's houses and then just goes through their house while they're sleeping, and she's not there to rob anything or do anything. She's just existing in that space,
Yeah,
laying down in a bed, and you can see the difference of how relaxed and comfortable she is doing this crazy stuff, and how she drags this very straight laced, you want to say like an A student kind of
hmm,
character, and makes him do all these things that are completely against his nature. And his fascination with her is so much that he throws everything, all caution into the wind, and actually follows, doing these things that normally I don't think he would participate in all.
right. Yeah,
If his ex or the new girl, not this girl. That's the other funny thing. Is that's something Layman likes to do, is he likes to introduce a lot of love interests at the same time, even if they aren't actual love interest, but maybe infatuation interests.
Hmm.
A lot of the male characters, especially when he does first person, will have multiple um, people that they're trying to, I don't know, almost weigh out relationships with. And you
Yeah.
definitely get that with this book because he starts
Yeah.
almost immediately dating a different girl after he gets broken up.
Yeah. So he's still pining for Holly.
Yeah.
He would take her back in a heartbeat, even though he was so mad at her.
Yeah, he would
Um,
definitely take her back, especially
yeah.
within the first half of the book. So the first
Yeah.
half of the book, he still kind of wants Holly, and during that period of time, he meets the girl that's outside sneaking in the house is Casey, and then the other girl,
Eileen, who is Holly's sorority sister.
right, who
Yeah.
has a secret crush on Ed, the main character, and
Yeah.
she immediately plays her
Hmm.
hand. She wants to date him.
Yeah.
No, she doesn't even wait for there to be any kind of grace period. She's in there immediately.
Yeah.
And he definitely has an interest in her. He doesn't allow his broken heart to stop him from, you know,
Yeah. Sowing his
ex-
royal oats, his wild oats.
yeah, experiment or
Yeah.
take his mind off his heartache.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of, so this book, I'm reading the first like two chapters, and I'm like, this is all about some kid just walking at night. Like, there's more to it than that. Um, but when you're first getting into it, it's like, is that all? Is that all there is? Like,
And what's funny though is he captures that vibe really well. I don't know. I go walking in my neighborhood at night a lot. Um, and it's just a normal neighborhood. So if I have a weird car drive up or anything like that, you can kind of imagine if it was something bad, but it never is going to be. But he's in a town that's got a downtown and all that, and so anybody that pulls up on him could at any point be up to no
yeah,
good. And he runs into a lot of weird characters. So
yeah. What was it? The Linda and Walinda, the wrestlers,
yeah,
the sisters
yeah, and then
in the
you
Jeep,
and then we have Miss Missy is what Casey calls her. It's this old
the bike hag.
like a grandma on a bike that's just constantly racing around at night and and owns the road. She's going to run over anybody that gets in her way.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when she first pops in, it's kind of a jump scare moment.
Hmm.
You can imagine it being a cat or whatever in the movie. And so for her to continually show up and then to play a very important part at the end of this,
At the end, yeah.
um, it's a funny little thing because she's a nobody. She's a jump scare. And so then
Hmm.
you're like, okay, I'll never think about this again. And then she just keeps showing up, which also shows you the quirkiness of this area. Also, maybe the size of it. It gives us an idea. We're not talking about New York City or,
Right.
Baltimore or something like that. It's a smaller, intimate town, even though he isn't familiar enough to know when he gets lost, because he easily gets lost while he's
Yeah.
walking around. He doesn't know much off of campus, which shows you kind of how isolated he is. And maybe it's used to push his naive nature and
Hmm.
everything because he's not familiar with this area and he's not familiar with all the things that are going on and what he's almost too dumb to be fearless, to be scared of
Yeah.
some of the situations, which I thought was kind of funny. And then he gets to the point where he is when he recognizes that these are dangerous things, and that's when Casey you know,
Yeah.
throws a wrench in it and forces him into these situations that are a little bit more outside his comfort zone. So it's a funny, um, it's almost watching a guy grow up in a
Hmm.
weird way as he
Yeah.
goes from like almost like being a college baby into this almost hero at the end of it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. I was kind of like um, torn about my feelings for Ed. At first I'm like, oh, poor guy, he got his heart crushed. And then I'm like, okay, he's rebounding. And then I'm like, okay, he's like crushing on this mystery girl whom he thinks is like between the age of 15 and 18, and he's a 20-year
yeah,
old college
yeah.
student.
So, but I mean, he's 20. He's in his head. It's in the
Yeah,
wheelhouse. If he's 18, he's got the green light. Now that is
yeah.
something you'll definitely see with Layman. Um, he doesn't sugarcoat especially first person. You're gonna get you're gonna get the deep, dark thoughts and the stupidity and the
Hmm.
way the a guy might work, especially a guy in his 20s, who's really, you get the feeling that that's kind of, he's on the, he's trying to sow his oats, like you said. So
Yeah.
he's keeping all avenues open for
Yeah.
how that's going to happen.
And then like so he's got this thing with Eileen. And then he's like, well, I'm just gonna go and see this mystery girl. And then he ends up peeping into Lois's window, which is the third, or technically the fourth woman.
Yeah.
Um,
And
who,
Lois is, I was gonna say, is that's one of the houses that she snuck into, that he saw her sneak into. So he's not
yeah,
just randomly picking a house.
yeah,
He thinks
he
that,
was looking for Casey.
yeah,
Yeah,
he thinks she might be there. So
yeah, um,
not that that justifies it. I'm just saying there's a reason he's doing it.
yeah,
So
yeah. So, and then when he finally meets up with Casey again, and they go in that other house, which she's apparently friends with the little girl that lives there.
mhm.
And they're like laying in the bed and she's asleep and he's like feeling her up and like, oh, should I just slip my hands in her pants? And I'm like, okay, you're a scumbag, Ed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, we're talking about when it was written, and we're talking about
Yeah,
horny
yeah, yeah,
20 year
yeah,
old, and reading the signs are not there. That is the
yeah.
funny thing about Casey, because she's very sexual without being sexual at all. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the way she doesn't hesitate from touching him. She's pressed against him. She'll kiss him without any provocation or anything. And so he's getting all of the signs that he's supposed to
Right.
to move forward. Now, of course, she's asleep, so yeah, he's not supposed to be moving forward. But um, he's also in that weird point where he's also, I don't think he's comfortable in his own skin. I don't think he understands how to communicate what he's feeling or how he's attracted to these women. And I don't think he understands, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. He's almost caveman like,
Mm-hmm.
he's horn dogged up and she's right there kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's funny that you get to see that because it's all through his perspective. And I don't like first person. That's the other thing I should have started with. I don't like it at all. And yet I've always enjoyed Richard Laymon's first person. He does a really good job um, of keeping you engaged and not, I don't know. Some people write first person like they're writing a grocery list, and it can't. It's
Yeah.
so just detached and not entertaining at all. But I think Layman does a really good job. But I think part of the reason he does such a good job is that he lets you see all of the imperfections and the perversions and the running dialogue that you might have in your head if you are this person.
Yeah. Um, I thought this book was a big tease. Um, because you get a lot of like creepiness, but then like it's snatched away. Like Miss Missy, the
Yeah.
bicycle hag. She just pops up every once in a while. And the creepy guy on the porch. Like
Yeah.
that was creepy.
Yeah, he goes and runs onto a porch to get away from a car that's attacking, not attacking him, but they're following him as if he thinks they're going to attack him. Isn't
Yeah.
that so he runs up on the porch and he's standing there just dead silent and still. And then all of a sudden there's a guy sitting on the porch and I can't remember what he does. Does he just turn his
He
head and
he
say something to him?
he lights a match.
That's right. And lets him know that he's on the porch and
Yeah,
then
and then he
throws him
like
out.
he cackles or something, I think.
Yeah. And you get a
Um,
lot of that. Now, the funny thing with this book is that a lot of people think this is more of a crime book than a horror novel, which I guess in a way you could
mhm,
see it that way. But in my
yeah,
mind, everything's horror. So
right,
it's
right.
just, you just took a crime thing and twisted it a little bit. And there are very horrific elements. We have the troll people under the bridge,
Yep,
the cannibalistic homeless. We have we've got
Randy.
this Randy the sadist who
Yep.
watches Ed show up the one night with Eileen at the donut shop, and then and that ties into, he had like the perfect donut when he was dating Holly there. So he wants to go recapture it. He's going to drown his sorrows in donuts. So he goes to the donut place, runs into Eileen, and that's when Eileen kind of makes him aware that she's interested.
Yeah.
But while that's happening, Randy's watching. And so then the next time Randy comes across him, he confronts him. Randy does, because he wants a piece of Eileen. And I guess he wants a piece of Ed too, because he's very,
Yeah.
he doesn't seem to have any, um,
And he kissed Ed too.
yeah, he grabs him, he kisses him because then Ed stabs him with the pen and runs away.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Randy doesn't seem to care. He just is looking for a hole. So,
Yeah.
and he seems to get off on terrorizing anybody that he can in that window, or whatever.
Yeah.
So
And I thought there would be more Randy action, like Randy sightings throughout the book. And there wasn't. So again, that's a tease.
yeah, which is
And
funny though, because he really is a third part. He's the third act. Now, Randy's
yeah,
almost the entire third act. So we
yeah,
get that little bit of this is a weird thing happening. Missy on the bike is a weird thing happening. The guy on the porch, the van that stops and opens, and the lady tries to entice Ed to come into the van to have
right,
sex
right.
or whatever. But then Ed notices that there's all the people in the van too, and so they're going to try and kidnap him or whatever. So he runs away. So you have all those little things, but then at the end of it, we do see Randy come back and be a major part. So it's a tease
Yeah,
at the beginning, but he delivers with Randy.
yeah. And then there was when Casey and Ed were in the park, um, and there was, I don't even know how they describe, I like some big, I just imagine some like primate looking man who
Yeah.
jumps over the fence. Like I was like, "Ooh, what's this gonna be?" And then they're like, "Oh, well, we're gonna run." And so they ran, and that was the end of the big
Right, which is,
person.
and I think that's in a way that's kind of funny because in life that's how it is. You have your fight or flight,
Yep.
and usually in life, if you run away, you don't usually have to deal with the big thing. It's funny though in a horror novel that he allows that to happen. Although I
Yeah.
think he uses it to move the Casey Ed relationship a little bit. He
Yeah.
uses that to break up the monotony of them being out there, but then to have them go. I think they do find a house to go crawl into.
Yep. I think that's when they go to that little girl,
Yeah,
her little friend there.
which is
Um,
funny. I and just to throw it out there, I didn't actually read it for this discussion. I read the end of it. Went through the last couple chapters so that we would be fresh, but I didn't have time to read the entire thing. I did talk about this book like a year ago, so I have read it within the year, which is way different than usual. But just reading the end of it, I was just like, oh man, this book is so good. Just
brought it
everything
all
about
back.
it. Yeah, and I really enjoy all the characters and the way he does everything. But I feel like this is one of the ones that's never talked about, rarely talked about. It's one of my favorites that he's done because it is
Yeah.
so weird and quirky. It shouldn't work. At no point should you finish this book and think, oh, and maybe you didn't. Maybe you're like, I hate this book and I just don't want to say it. But
Yeah.
um,
I
like,
don't hate it. It was definitely a train wreck for me. I I didn't know what was happening, but I couldn't put it down. I think I read it in like 3 days.
yeah, you just
Um,
seem to go through it really quickly, which was really cool.
and yeah, so I was like enthralled with the story. So I definitely didn't hate it. I was like, but I'm like, I don't know if I should like it.
Right. And then I don't know.
You know?
I don't know if it reflects it. I don't know if people have read my stuff and this. I mean, my stuff's kind of like this. I have open-ended things happen in my stories. I don't always explain everything. Sometimes I do leave you hanging, or maybe I do push it forward and swing back around. But it's all that kind of things that I've always enjoyed reading, and I think Layman does it perfectly.
Yeah. Um, I love the character of Kirkus.
Yeah, well, I want to say his best friend, but really nemesis would be a better term. It starts off as a
Frenemy,
nemesis, yeah.
frenemy.
So,
Yeah. Um, because I'm like, oh, this guy is pretentious. I don't like
right.
him. But then as you get to know more about what happened to him and his backstory, you're like, oh, okay.
And
Um,
again, we have to reflect when was it written,
yeah,
I want to say it was 2000 and well, he probably wrote it earlier than that, but it came out 2001.
yeah,
And so you have to is the character's gay, he has a crush on Ed, but he can't really come out. I mean, in 2001, that wasn't something you would
yeah,
do.
yeah. And he was attacked as a teenager.
Yeah.
Um, but he was kind of having like a consensual relationship. I think it was like some football player or something in high school. But then they were caught, and of course the football player was like, "Oh, he attacked me or he came on to me," and
Right.
they like beat him up and they tattooed fag across his neck and
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
cut it into him and
And so you definitely could tell that
yeah,
and it's a reflection of the time. So
Yeah.
you're going to have that. Not that it wouldn't happen today, but I think it's a little more open today. I think people could be a little more
Yeah.
understanding of the situation or whatever. But in
Yeah.
2001, that definitely would have been something that would have caused early 90s, middle 90s, whatever, would have been
Yeah.
something that would have caused a situation for the football player who doesn't want to look weak or however he wants to, word it in front
Yeah.
of his friends or other football players.
Yeah. And then I got mad at the way Ed was treating Kirkus. And like I
Yeah,
get it, Ed's not gay and Kirkus is, and Kirkus had a crush on him and he can't reciprocate.
yeah,
Um,
but not only just a crush and all that stuff, but Kirkus was very aggressive,
yeah, he was very
like
aggressive.
almost predatory. And if we
Yeah.
would have had that in today, I mean, you look at it today and you'd be like, oh, now if that was a guy and a girl, you would be like, that guy's 100% in the wrong. So you can kind of get that idea. I
Yeah.
find it fascinating that Lehman is writing this in 2001, having these things play out the way they did. And then you look at it in the lens today and you can definitely see all these, the Me Too and all that stuff kind of play out in his book from forever ago with
Yeah.
these characters.
Yeah. So he definitely does a great job of giving you characters that you're not sure you like, but then you like them a lot and then you feel for them and then you're like, wait, you're an asshole. And then you feel for them again and then you end up being like, I really like this character.
Yeah, he writes people, which is, I
Yeah.
think, the fascinating thing right there, because there's a dimension to all these characters, even the weird, quirky ones that just pop in. You can see that there's something there. There's a little backstory that makes them the way they are.
Yeah.
And then he obviously thought through it. Now maybe we'd go back and look and he'd be like, oh no, I didn't think of anything and I just threw these characters out there. But
Yeah.
um, when you read it, you can see, yeah, these are all crazy, flawed individuals that we get front row seat to see.
Yeah. How about those landlords that sit in their apartment with their door open and just like
Yeah,
watch the people coming and going from the apartment building? That's totally creepy.
yeah, and I think that's funny too. But you also can kind of get it. You're talking about a landlord in like what, a 4 apartment building.
Yeah.
Um, they want to keep an eye on everything and make sure nothing goes wrong. So they're almost
And they're
parental in that
older.
way.
Yeah.
They're almost
Older.
parental in that way, that they're keeping an eye on everything. But at the same time, you get this weird, they may be down for weird stuff kind of vibe off of them, and they
Hmm.
might be looking for, maybe they can, corrupt somebody coming in or out or the whole thing. So they
I
definitely
was,
were very interesting characters to have as a side.
yeah,
You know,
I was screaming in my head, who would live there with that?
right. That's the other thing, is you're gonna kind of question what's going on with the people that do. I guess the rent was that good.
Maybe.
The thing that we haven't talked that much about, I made a reference to, but I want to say the scariest thing about this book is the bridge and the
Yes.
trolls. So we get a, a Billy Goat Gruff kind of vibe with this thing, and this is the thing that I've never been able to wrap my head around, because they are on campus and they are close enough to a whole bunch of different areas, that when him and Eileen start fooling around, that they decide under the bridge
Is the place
at
to be.
night is the place to go do this. That's the only thing that I always question, like this. I mean, I get it. They were ready to go. And I think at that point, we've already established Ed's kind of a horn dog. So I think in
Yeah.
his mind, he's like, we need to get this going ASAP. I don't want to blow my shot. So let's take her down to the under the bridge. So, but I think that is some of the best, scariest stuff. Even
Hmm.
knowing what was going to happen when I reread it, I still found myself just like, you know, out of breath, like, your heart pumping,
Yeah.
that chill that goes through you when the people under the bridge, when they think they're by themselves and she whispers, there's somebody here with us, and they start pulling on their bodies and stuff. I mean, it is terrifying when you
Yeah.
think, and I think that ties in because I do actually have a little bit of a fear of that, because when I was a kid, do you remember Hill Street Blues?
Hmm.
When I was a kid, there was an episode where homeless people that lived under the street, wherever Hills, I think the Hill Street Blues, was that in New York? Or
I
was
think
it,
so. Yeah.
and maybe it might be Detroit or
Maybe.
something, but
Yeah.
wherever it was, they had people living under the streets, homeless people, and they take a cop and they tie him up under the thing, and they're going to eat them or whatever. And I mean, it's just a normal show on ABC, but I think I was like 6 or 7 at the time. That imprinted on me. So I've always had a little bit of a like, that's not a good idea. We don't need to be under this street or under the bridge or any of that stuff. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that was a very like heart-pounding scene. And I could like, especially since they're in the pitch black,
right.
they can't see anything.
Also, we're talking about a time before cell phones being, prevalent and like not having flashlights, even if they have a cell phone, it's just the screen. If they have anything, it's not going to have any apps on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's no reason to go down there. That's the point. But we tie it back
Yeah.
to his horniness and hers too.
Yeah.
She should have been the voice of reason. She could have
Yeah.
easily said, no, we're gonna continue, but just let's go somewhere, that has a bed or a mattress or something, a cushion. But they're gonna
Yeah.
go under the bridge, which I think is funny though, is that so you get that attack. She loses her clothes, so he's having to carry her. I think he takes his shirt off and puts it over her, so she is
Yeah.
clothed, but that's all she has. And then he's gonna carry her to his apartment, I think, is where they go.
Yeah.
But that
And they
whole
end
time,
up stopping at the liquor store and she buys them a vampire cape because it's of course around Halloween, so there's
right.
costumes and she gets him a cape to wear.
And that's when they run into Kirkus again.
Yeah.
And he meets her, and then they kind of get that story going again. Because the first time we meet him, he's just he just blows through, and we're introduced to him as the nemesis. They both
Yeah.
are like they're like the two brains in the English department. They're both, the higher ups. Everybody looks up to them in that class or that um, major. They're both English majors. And so they're
Yeah.
always going back and forth trying to prove who's smarter, who's more well read, who knows more about everything when it comes to English and all that stuff. And it makes me wonder if he is telling us a story about himself
Mm.
and a colleague or himself and another classmate when he was in college. Because I assume, I mean, he went on to be a teacher, I think. And so he, when he wasn't writing and stuff, I think he did teach for a little while at least. I think he kind of followed the Stephen King path. Um, so I just think I always wondered if that was like somebody he knew. Like if that person read it, they'd be like, oh, he's writing about me here. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love how he had Kirkus wearing an ascot. Like
yeah, I know.
that's not
It would
even something like in 2000. That's like not even.
Oh, it would have really stood out in 2000. It would
Yeah.
have been very odd.
Yeah.
And when I look at it now and I said he was a teacher, I think I'm just talking on my ass right now. He looks like a school teacher, and I have no clue if he actually was a school teacher or not, but he always has that. If you looked at him, you would never think this is the guy that's writing some of the worst things in horror at that time. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, the whole book, I'm like, okay, it's got it. Like, what's going on? The book was really mild.
oh yeah, this is not this
Yeah.
isn't this isn't any of when it comes down to the extreme nature of it, it is
Yeah.
extremely, which is why I
Yeah.
think some people think of it as a crime novel more than a
Yeah.
horror novel, but there are too many horror elements for me to ignore it. So
Yeah. But the ending, like, it just ramps up. It's like, he's walking around and then he like left Eileen in the apartment to go find Casey. Eileen got drunk and passed out because they were having dinner with Kirkus, and Eileen passed out and he kicked Kirkus out, and then he's like, I'm going to find Casey. And then he sees um, Eileen in the truck with Randy, and then
yeah,
he's like trying to convince himself it's not her.
but she was wearing a super pretty dress, so
Yeah.
it was like a one of a kind thing. So he knew he saw her.
Yeah. And there's this whirlwind. So now he's trying to find Casey and he ends up with Lois and they get in the car and she's got like this bag of weapons. And then,
And then what happens? Miss Missy, the old bike hag, pops out and causes a car accident. Lois crashes the car,
yeah,
forcing Ed to take the bag of weapons and get out of there so that they don't get in trouble with the police when
yeah,
they show up to do the accident. So with that, the bicycle hag comes back. She removes, a character that we don't have to worry about now, Lois, and then forces Ed back on the street, even though he's armed, but he's also injured because he got hit with the airbag, right?
yeah. And then he has a fight with Missy because she ends up grabbing the bag from him.
Well, even better because and he throws it at her. Remember, he's trying to knock her
Yep.
off the bike. She just catches it, laughs at him, and rides away. Which I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, perfect, because now he doesn't have any of the weapons that would make the confrontation with Randy so much easier. He doesn't have anything. Now he's back to his, he's on his own, still injured, no weapons, nothing to do, no plan, and
Yep.
then he falls asleep at a tree.
Yeah, and then and Casey finds him.
Who wakes him
Um,
up with a kiss. So
yes.
then you're like, okay, so that's where you get that weird, sexual thing where you kind of get the idea that she's into him because there's no inhibitions with this girl at all, which
No.
is kind of odd. And we get the idea that there's bad things have happened to her. And that's
Right.
part of the reason why she does what she does, the walking at night, the constant moving, the disappearing and reappearing.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting character. You'd like to know a little bit more about her.
Mm,
I would have been great if you would have been able to revisit these characters.
yeah, that would have been awesome. So then they end up above the thrift store. And
And so they go to the donut store. Remember, they
yeah,
go back to the donut store, and that's when they see the dress in the window
yeah.
across the street at the thrift store. So it all ties together. It's a perfect circle of storytelling.
Hmm.
Everything that we saw in the beginning that were little bits and pieces of throwaway stuff, the hag, the Lois, the donut shop, everything ties together, so that we know that we're at the end of the story. We're actually where it started.
Yep.
So it's a perfect circle. And so they're at an old, what is it? It was a thrift store, right? Is that what the
Yeah,
vibe
it
you
was a
got?
thrift store. Yeah.
But it was like the shop in the birds in the scope, in the
Yeah.
way that he described it. It was like a multi-floored thrift store just
Hmm.
filled with things. But
A
also,
sword. Didn't they find a sword?
yeah, he finds a katana like immediately. He takes it so he does get to be rearmed,
Yeah.
but but now this is a hand-to-hand thing. It's not as easy as having the gun. But then also the place is so full, it's got a lot of hidey holes, places where you can't see stuff. So he's turned it into almost a fun house of death, for
Yeah.
them to go through.
Yeah. And then they find Eileen upstairs and
Naked
naked, like
and
tied up, and she's very clever, like candles around her, and I guess the blanket is soaked in like lamp
lantern.
oil.
Yeah.
Lamp oil. Yeah.
And it's
Um,
odorless, so they wouldn't have known that. If he doesn't
yeah.
tell them that, then they don't know. But of course, he wants them to know immediately because he wants to show that he has the upper hand.
Yeah. And he's like throwing darts at Eileen.
Yeah, every time anybody does anything that makes him upset, so then she starts dog cussing them every time they argued or said anything. She's like, "Quit saying it, because I'm getting hit." Because he's hitting her perfect bullseyes wherever he's throwing her. Side,
Yeah, because he was hidden. They didn't
breast.
know where he
Yeah.
was. Um, the creepy part about that one was when Casey, um, he made Casey and Ed get naked and
Hmm.
kind of like get frisky, and Casey kneels down, and then she realizes he can't see her that low, so from wherever he's hidden, and she
Right.
like starts like crab walking, like backwards walking to get over to Eileen to blow out the candles.
Yeah, what's weird is that she initiates the whole thing. So she must have known that he couldn't see, or she wanted to test it because
Yeah,
she's the one that gets down there, drops, and then Eileen has to explain what's going on.
yeah,
And and then Randy gets into it. Randy's really into the fact that these two are doing something that he can't even see.
yeah,
But he feels like you almost get the feeling that Randy starts to think that everybody's caught the vibe that he's trying to put out, and that we're all about to see some sort of weird wild orgy thing, which I don't
yeah,
understand how he would even remotely think that, but you can kind of get an idea that
yeah,
Randy's not all up there. He's
yeah,
missing a few. So
yeah,
but yeah, when she starts crab walking away, and then Ed has to continue to play act like it's happening, I think that's
yeah,
a funny scene in your head too.
yeah, yeah. And then I forget exactly what happened, but I know Kirkus shows up.
Well,
Um,
Randy gets upset when he figures out what's going on, because he comes out and he sees her putting all the candles out. He has a gun. He starts shooting. He shoots Ed twice, I think, and then he shoots Casey,
yeah,
and that's when Kirkus shows up
right,
because of
right.
the gunshots, and he has the sword that they left behind,
And
and he
Casey pretended to be dead.
right, but she was only grazed, I think.
Yeah. Um, so yeah.
But it was awesome
Uh,
because Kirkus flies through, cuts off the guy's hand, and in a way, I mean, it's not the same because, of course, he wasn't part of this situation, but in a way, you can kind of see that he's standing up to the bullies that he didn't stand up to when he was younger. You
yep.
know, he's trying to save his friends and all that. So he gets in the end, Kirkus is the hero.
Yep.
Ed really, you know, he's kind of a hero in a way, but not the hero of this story. Kirkus is the reason that they're all
Yeah.
started,
And then they take Randy and drop him under the bridge for
which is
the
perfect. They hang him from a rope, lower him down, and then the cave trolls or whatever come out, bridge trolls come out, start attacking him. They just leave. Next day
yep.
they come back and even the rope's gone.
Yep.
And what's funny is, remember, they accidentally killed one of the cave people or the
Hmm.
troll people. And so they call the police. And the police go and nothing happens because they consume
Or
their
did
own.
they go? Because they said,
Yeah, we don't even know if they went or not, but they did
yeah,
call it in. They thought that they would at least get, because then they were worried for half the book that they were going to be arrested for murdering
yeah,
this person under there. So,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, no, the whole thing is just wild ass. Like I said, it shouldn't work, but it does.
yeah,
It's captivating. It's just one of those things you sit down and you're just like, oh, this is amazing.
yeah. You can't put it down, even though you're like, I'm not sure I even like this, but you
Right.
just can't put it down.
And it's one that came out at the end. So this isn't like an early thing. This is what he's worked to. And I feel like in my mind, this is probably my favorite. But the top two usually are this and vampire, the traveling
Traveling
vampire
vampire,
show. That
vampire
one
show.
gets
Yeah,
all the because it won a Stoker. So those are the two that people like to point out. We're
yeah,
going to get into some of the earlier stuff, and it's like completely wild, but it's the
yeah,
same idea. It's a lot of times it's something that should be a short story or shouldn't work, and somehow he's turned it into this amazing, captivating full novel. So,
yeah. And then the very ending of the book is Ed moves in with Lois.
mhm.
He's still got Casey, and Eileen still comes by
Right, and
sometimes.
and and that does tie into some sort of, and I'm gonna have to assume it's some sort of layman fantasy because this isn't the only book where the male character gets to have his cake and eat it too. It
Yeah,
happens a lot. So
yeah,
without knowing him specifically, I can only guess that this must be something that he must have thought about often, but because
yeah,
it happens way too much. But also, we learned that Ed is writing this as a book, and he's changed all the names of the characters and all that stuff.
yes,
And so we don't even
yes,
know. Um, we can believe all of it to be true, but none of the characters are who they say they are.
yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it's a fun read. And like I said, though, it's not the first one I would have chosen for us to read, but because I'd already read it recently, it made
Yeah.
the most sense for us to read.
Hmm.
But I think, well, it'll be interesting. When we read the next one, we'll see if he goes back or forth.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
only reason I suggested this um, to possibly be the first one is because it's the night in the Lonesome October, and it's almost
coming up.
October,
Yeah,
so that's the only reason why I was like, let's do that one.
this is I like the cover, but it's very simple. I want to say this is
Mm,
probably the UK version.
yeah, yeah, it definitely gives the October vibes because it's orange and gold,
Yeah,
and
and then you get the simple him walking, and I guess that's supposed to be dawn,
yeah,
this and stuff. So you kind of get the idea, but um, and that's the funny thing. By this time it said Richard Laymon, it wouldn't have mattered to me. After I picked up my first Layman, I think I probably read one or two, and then at that point it didn't matter. All that mattered to me was what order was I going to read them in. It did not matter, anything else. I didn't care what the cover looked like or anything like that. It might help me decide the order, but I was just going to go get another Richard Laymon book when I started because, this when I discovered him, Darkness Tells Us. When I found that book and read it, I was just blown away by that. And I can distinctly remember standing in my local Barnes and Noble with Don standing next to me and me holding up two different Layman books Come Out Tonight and Body Rides, and saying, which one do you think would be interesting? And she doesn't care about horror at all. So
Yeah.
she basically was like, well, they both sound dumb. So she's like, I wouldn't pick either of these. So I want to say that time I took Come Out Tonight, but eventually you read them all.
Yeah. Yeah. This one's
I think
it's
I think it's a hardcover,
mm,
but it's basically the first one, right? Just expanded a little
yeah.
bit and no orange.
Yeah.
And I don't mind it. It
No.
doesn't tell us anything. And I think I kind of like that in this one because this is a Seinfeld episode. It's a book about nothing
Hmm.
while being about a whole bunch of things. So I don't know if a cover is going to tell us anything really.
Yeah. I like
Although,
this one.
yeah, I
I
thought this
like
was cool.
there's Miss Missy.
I want to say this might have been a Cemetery Dance version, when they would do limited releases. And I
Yeah.
want to say, I hope it was Cemetery Dance. It might have been another one of the companies, but he seemed to do a lot of things with them, and always have like, limited 100 issues or 100, hardbacks or something like that. So that I want to say that's what this was, but I didn't do any research. I just found the four covers and uploaded them.
Yeah. I think this one's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know that one right there actually is kind of creepy, and it kind of gives you that weird vibe, and it makes you want to know who she is. I bet you if you bought it for her, you'd be a little disappointed. I
Yeah.
mean, she's amazing when she's in there, but she's also not in there, like you said, a lot. So,
Yeah.
and
And
then
this is
this is,
the cover I have.
yeah, I was gonna say this is the general paperback,
Yeah.
and
It's
it's
a little
awesome.
yeah, it's awesome, but it's a little misleading because with this, you kind of get serial killer, like this may
Yeah,
be like a slasher. Um,
which I guess in a way you could say Randy is,
yeah,
but he's more of a serial rapist, I guess.
yeah,
I mean, we don't know what he wants to do at the end. I think he actually thought they were going to have a good time, and then they would be buddies. I mean, you get
yeah.
that vibe when he's talking to him in the donut store. Why
Hmm.
don't you introduce me to her? Why don't we be friends? Why don't we do this? Now, maybe at the end he kills everybody and he starts a cycle again. We don't know. Randy, like I said, was a loose cannon throughout this whole thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, this is the cover. I mean, this cover pulls you right to the book, though. Even though it isn't exactly telling you what it is, it does tell you enough about what's going on that you want to read this. I love this cover.
Yeah,
This is a cool cover.
yeah. So yeah, I like the covers. I do prefer this one. I would love to have this cover. That's just
Yeah.
that's pretty
We need
cool.
to do some research and see. That was the
Yeah.
cool thing about at TBR getting to stand next to Robert,
Oh,
because he
yeah.
had that table full, and he had a whole bunch of layman stuff on there. I had everything that he had on the table. He had saved two that he had posted about that I had already pre-purchased, and then I found the Western that Layman had written under a pen name. So he had
Oh,
that on the
wow.
table. I about knocked the table over to grab it to make sure nobody else got it before I did when I saw that it was sitting there, because I've been looking for that book for a long time, and I've never actually seen it ever to even be
Oh,
like, so it's one of the few times where I didn't think about it. I just grabbed it, said I need to have this, you know,
yeah.
figure out how to get this. So, but yeah, that was really cool because a person swung by the table and bought all the Layman books, like an hour later.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah.
so just say he has like 30 plus books. All of them are great except for The Lake. And in fact, I'd be willing to reread The Lake just to verify that it is garbage. But I think it's garbage because he died before a few of his books were released.
Mm,
And so The Glory Bus, um, the Mummy one, which I can't think of the name of off the top of my head, Ayamora, I think's the name, and The Lake were all manuscripts that weren't 100% done, and they got
mm.
released after he died. And now I want to say Night in the Lonesome October might have been the last thing he released that he finished before he died. But that's a complete book. If you read the other ones, Glory, and I'm gonna say Ayamora until I can. I'll probably have to post something,
Yeah.
but I'll point. And they both are 75 to 90%. And you can kind of tell somebody might have gone over and just kind of smoothed a couple things out. And I could be totally wrong, but that's what they read like. When you read the other Layman, then you read these. But the lake looks like it was a idea. Like he had written something, it was in a drawer, and then they put something out. It has his name on it, but it doesn't read like a Layman at all.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a very odd thing. I was completely just, I was shocked at how much I hate that book, because even the ones I'm not a fan of the Beast House series. I don't like the Cellar. I don't like any of those. But I can still appreciate them for what they are. And
Right.
they are Layman. They're a reflection of him. I don't find that in the lake at all. So, but again, that might be something we do. Maybe we read it after we read, 6 or 7 Laymans, and we read that one to see if maybe I'm just completely off my rocker.
Yeah. Yeah, we could. Or we could do a list of books that Eric really doesn't like, and we'll make
Well, you
you.
know what? That's one of the few that I actually am very vocal about. You'll almost never hear me say that I don't like a book, because I'm well aware that I'm a weirdo and my tastes are so different from everybody that
Mm,
when I see people that say they like a book, that's awesome because they found some joy. I may
right.
not have found that joy, but I think it's cool. And when a lot of people are like, no, this is a good book, and I'm like, well, I mean, I get it. The crowd enjoys this book. Totally cool. I'm not going to go out there and shit on it because I didn't like it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I hardly ever will say I didn't like a book.
but the lake sucks, and that's just the end of it. So, I mean, that's where we are with that. So,
All right. Well, tell us how you really feel. Maybe we should read that one next.
all right. Now, no, I want you to have a few more under your belt. You got to read it a little bit more so you have an idea. You got a
Okay.
taste of Layman, but
Yeah.
you need it reinforced, which you'll get if we read a couple more. And I think we have some cool ones on the list. And I'm like, I could easily replace all of them, and we still have some cool ones on the list. There's so many good things to get into.
Yeah.
Uh, this will be a fun project because I think what we can do is pockets of Layman. We can do like 5, and then we can go do other stuff,
Yeah.
and then we can come back and do some, and do some other stuff, and then come back again and just be like, oh, okay, this is cool. He's everything that I love about horror. So,
Nice. No, I'm definitely looking forward to reading more. This book didn't turn me off of reading him at all.
well, that's good
Um,
because
yeah.
that would have been an odd,
Yeah.
uncomfortable hour long, but that's fine too. If you read one of these, you're like, no, this is complete garbage. That would be fine too, because then at least that'll be a fun, interesting what about back and forth.
Yep.
So,
Exactly. And now we have our not Stephen King book of the week, um, Recessive Nature by Brandon Perras-Sanchez. Um, this book is amazing. It's a cryptid book. It's actually a story about the Jersey Devil.
oh, that's cool.
Um, it's about cousins, Joe and Cole. They come from a long line of cryptid hunters, and their fathers went missing years ago, and they find this journal or letter from one of their fathers saying, "We're going after the Jersey Devil. If we don't ever come back, don't come looking for us." And of course, they go looking for them. um, Cole's sister comes along, and then Cole's girlfriend comes along. So they go out to the Pine Barrens to search for the Jersey Devil to, get revenge for their fathers. And then it just takes a turn into something completely unexpected, which I'm going to try not to um, spoil it for anybody. But the family that they meet out in the woods in the Pine Barrens is just incredible. And you go from being like, yeah, Cole and Joe, you got to kill this thing. It killed your fathers, to, oh my God, I hope they kill you, you know?
Huh.
So yeah, it's really fascinating. It gave me um uh Nightbreed vibes, like with the different
Well, yeah, I
care
mean, I've already got like 5 or 6 different movies in my head from just
yeah,
your description, and then you add Nightbreed to it.
yeah,
Yeah, this sounds fantastic.
yeah. And of course it takes place, I think, 85. So it's like a thing. What I love about this book the best is at the beginning it mentions a whole bunch of cryptids, and it mentions the Wolpertinger,
Oh, there
which
you
is
go.
my favorite cryptid, which nobody ever talks about. So I was very impressed with that. But yeah, this
Yeah,
is a
no, that's cool.
Yeah, this is a really awesome book. I'm sure you saw the pictures
I was gonna
on.
say the packaging was really amazing,
Yeah,
right? It looks like a VCR and you pull
yeah.
it
So
out
this
the
is the
tape.
sleeve.
Yeah.
So it looks like a VHS cover, and then when you pull out the hardback, it looks like an actual video cassette, a VHS tape on the front and the back.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
really cool. He's cutting edge when it comes to his
yeah,
packaging and stuff.
yeah,
He's a cool dude. I like talking to him. I saw him
yeah.
he was at Scares, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
He was at
yeah,
Scares.
yeah.
Um, so they have this cover here is the hardback, and that's only available on his website because they're limited, bpshorror.com. The paperback has a different cover, and I didn't get a picture of that, but
I'll
it's
tell you,
equally, yeah,
if you're gonna read it, go get the hardcover. I mean, it's worth it just to have it as. I mean, it's cool
yeah,
looking.
yeah. And
So,
so the paperback right now is available on his website, but I believe he said on the 23rd it will be available on Amazon, and the ebook is available on Amazon right now.
very
Um,
cool.
so yeah, if you can get this hardback, it is gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. And if you
Yeah.
order it from his website, you get a free worm, which is
All
part
right.
of a thing for one of the characters in the book. So
Very
um,
cool.
yeah, very, very awesome book. It's so awesome.
Yeah, he's a good
Definitely.
storyteller. People should check him out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
He's got some cool ideas.
Yeah, he's not only an author because he co-wrote The White Bishop with Aaron
Mhm.
Beauregard, but he's also a movie director and actor.
Yeah.
So he has, I think, three films: Death Drop Gorgeous, Saint Drago, and Queen of Rats. I think is the third one. Are movies that they have. They do. He does independent movies. Um, so yeah, check him out. You will not be sorry if you read this book at all.
Cool.
All right, so that is our episode. We will have a link to, we'll have Brandon's website on the bottom. So if you want to check out, grab his book. Um, and I believe the next book we're reading is Horrorween because it's coming up on Halloween. So
Yeah, Al, I never could think of his last name. Sargent
Sarantino,
Sarantino. Yeah, that's it. That's probably
Sarantino,
it.
yeah. Um,
But also we're gonna do All Hallows Eve and Terrifier. If you guys haven't
Terrifier.
seen it, go check it out on Tubi, and then you guys will have it so we don't have any spoilers.
Yeah. Yeah, that will be our next episode. And then after the Terrifier, we'll have Horrorween.
With maybe a special guest to talk about
Special
it with
guest.
us.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Best of
throw him
luck.
under the bus yet. We'll give him an
Yeah.
opportunity in case he wants to back out. So
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode.
take it easy.